Today we journey to Indonesia, to a humid May morning at Soekarno-Hatta International Airport in the capital city of Jakarta. There hundreds of passengers are lining up, preparing to board a familiar low-cost commercial flight to the coastal city of Makassar. Everyone believes this is just a routine journey of a little over an hour, a safe trip guaranteed by modern aviation technology. But within the next few hours, the Boeing 737 that takes off from this runway will vanish completely from surveillance radar, plunging into an invisible, haunting path in midair. 152 people will experience breathless moments on the edge of survival, forcing a nation's aviation industry to confront a stark truth about its oversight. In today's story, we will trace the loose links connecting the ground to the sky, deleted warnings, electronic illusions, and how a routine technical glitch nearly escalated into a catastrophic event. A typical morning at Soekarno-Hatta International Airport always begins with a familiar rush. The roar of jet engines echoes in the distance, the smell of fuel hangs heavy in the humid air, and crowds with luggage move quickly through the terminals. The morning of May 11th, 2006 is no exception. At the departure gate of the budget carrier Adam Air, 146 passengers are boarding flight number 782. Their destination is Makassar, a bustling port city on Sulawesi Island, more than an hour's flight to the east. The aircraft assigned to this journey is a Boeing 737-300, registered as PK-KKW. The fuselage is painted in the airline's signature bright orange and blue, a symbol of the low-cost aviation boom sweeping Indonesia. But behind that vibrant coat of paint lies a mechanical reality few notice. This aircraft is 19 years old, an age that demands strict technical maintenance. In the cockpit, the captain and first officer are completing their pre-flight checks. The captain, 41, is a seasoned professional with over 7,000 flight hours, nearly 2,000 of which are on the Boeing 737. Sitting to his right is a 33-year-old first officer who has also accumulated nearly 3,000 flight hours. Today, the cramped cockpit is busier than usual. There are 3 trainee flight attendants present. According to the incident logs, they enter the cockpit not to serve, but to take a live knowledge assessment administered by the flight crew during the flight. The clock strikes approximately 6 o'clock. Amid the clicking of switches and the hum of the air conditioning, a warning signal appears on the overhead panel. The inertial reference system, known as the IRS, the core navigational brain of the aircraft, is malfunctioning. One of the 2 IRS units indicates a fault. In aviation, the IRS is irreplaceable for older aircraft like PK-KKW that lack integrated GPS. It uses gyroscopes to sense every minute movement, calculating the aircraft's position on a purely spatial map. Without the IRS, pilots are completely blind when flying over the open sea at night or through thick cloud layers. The captain immediately notifies Adam Air's ground maintenance team. A technician quickly boards, removes the faulty unit, and replaces it with another component taken from storage. After a few minutes, the system reboots. The warning lights go out. A veteran pilot's professional intuition suggests that everything is back to normal. To be cautious, the captain configures the flight management system to receive navigational data from IRS Unit 1 on his side of the cockpit, the component that is working perfectly. At 6:20, the Boeing 737 receives pushback clearance. The CFM56 engines roar to life, carrying all 152 souls away from the Jakarta runway into the early morning sky. Heading east across the Java coastline, everything goes smoothly and according to procedure, just like thousands of other flights. But that piece only exists on the surface.
From the crew's perspective, at the time, they did their duty. They detected the fault, requested maintenance, and rechecked the equipment. The captain had every reason to trust the newly installed component. But the problem did not lie in what they could see. It lay in what was hidden within the airline's maintenance records. According to investigation documents released later, the IRS system on this exact Boeing 737PK-KKW had been repeatedly flagged as faulty by pilots of previous flights, 18 times within the last 2 months. 18 warnings regarding a severe navigational flaw. Yet, the pressure to maintain a packed schedule and optimize costs at a budget carrier led to a superficial solution. Instead of grounding the aircraft for a complete overhaul of the signal lines, technicians had previously applied temporary fixes, resetting circuit breakers, cleaning loose plugs, or swapping old components between planes. And on that morning of May 11th, the IRS Unit 2 installed onto the aircraft was actually an old device carrying a pre-existing system line fault. On the ground, while the aircraft was stationary. This deceptive device did not show any deviation. The flight management system ran stably for the moment because it was drawing data from the safe IRS-1 on the left. The peace of mind in the cockpit at takeoff was merely a visual illusion created by electronic screens. As the aircraft reaches its cruise altitude of 10 kilometers, equivalent to flight level FL 330, the seeds of chaos begin to operate through silent, automated algorithms. Below the windows, a blanket of white clouds stretches across the deep blue Java Sea. The weather is flawless. Viewed from the outside, Flight 782 moves with silent majesty. Inside the cockpit, the pilot's focus begins to drift. The 3 trainee flight attendants step in, holding their training portfolios. They stand in the tight space behind the pilot seats, preparing for their routine assessment. Questions about safety protocols and somewhat hesitant answers from the young trainees mix with light laughter, easing the tense atmosphere typical of a commercial cockpit. Meanwhile, the captain and first officer repeatedly execute flight shortcuts. Jakarta Air Traffic Control approves them to fly directly to the Kapur waypoint, an optimized route that saves time and fuel. Shortly after, the flight is handed over to Bali Air Traffic Control. The clock shows 6:45. While the cockpit is occupied with training questions, the flight management system executes a silent automatic command. No alarm sounds, no light flashes. The computer system suddenly swaps the data source. It disconnects from the well-functioning IRS-1 on the left and switches to drawing data from the newly replaced IRS-2. The moment it takes over control. IRS-2, carrying its internal line fault, begins sending erroneous parameters. It signals to the computer that the aircraft is drifting to the left of its route. To correct the perceived error, the autopilot commands a right turn. The Boeing 737 begins to bank, entering a slow, continuous right turn, steering directly south towards Sumba Island, instead of continuing east toward Makassar. The terrifying part is that on the primary display screen in front of the pilots, the simulated flight path still shows the aircraft travelling straight ahead. The autopilot is navigating based on a distorted spatial map. At this moment, a small amber text appears on the control panel. IRS, nav only. The first officer glances at the warning and quickly flips a switch to clear the line. The first officer believed the inertial system was navigating properly. He did not know that the inertial unit in control at that moment was the faulty IRS-2, which was silently steering them hundreds of kilometers away from their target.
The aircraft has now completely deviated from its safe aerial corridor, crossing through multiple other commercial flight paths without any supervision at the same time. The early morning sun begins to stream directly into the cockpit because the heading has shifted entirely to the south. The sun, rising in the east, which should have been ahead of the windshield, is now shining intensely from the left side.
The harsh glare bothers the captain. He takes some flight manual papers, wedges them into the edge of the windshield to block the sun, and returns to the training conversation with the trainees. This act of blocking the glass inadvertently covers one of the only visual clues that could have alerted them to the actual position of the sun. Among the trainees standing in the back, a young woman notices something unusual. She knows the plane is supposed to be flying east, and logically, the sun should be right in front. Yet, the sunlight is casting shadows from the left. The young woman looks at the shadows, looks at the two pilots, and then looks down at the documents in her hands. Hesitation due to the steep hierarchy and the fear of being judged as unknowledgeable in front of a veteran captain keeps her lips sealed.
She chooses silence.
The final link between human intuition and geographic reality is officially broken. While the Boeing 737 continues to fly in absolute blindness under its operators, heading toward the wilderness of remote Sumba Island, the air traffic control stations on the ground begin to enter a disastrous game of hide-and-seek. The planned route was to take Flight 782 across the Java Sea straight to Sulawesi Island. According to administrative procedures, Bali Control hands over monitoring rights of the flight to Padang Control before the radar of the Makassar Centre takes over. At the Makassar Area Control Centre, radar screens sweep continuously in steady rotations. On the electronic display, the icon for Adam Air Flight 782 is clearly visible. A small square representing the aircraft moves steadily along the prescribed flight corridor. For the air traffic controllers, this is a busy but routine morning. The aircraft is exactly where it is supposed to be, but that is only half the truth. When the aircraft drifted past a distance of 18.5 kilometers away from its original route, a critical safety system on the ground should have triggered. That is the RAM system, Route Adherence Monitoring. This system is diagnosed to scan and detect any vehicle drifting outside the safe corridor, immediately flashing a red signal so controllers can warn the pilots. On that morning of May 11th, the RAM system at Makassar remains completely silent. No alarm sounds. The radar equipment on the ground was working, but the human minds operating it had stripped away their own line of defense. Due to a severe error during a ground software maintenance installation, the system's RAM alert threshold, instead of being set at the standard 10 nautical miles, about 18.5 kilometers, was mistakenly configured to 20 nautical miles. Ground-level negligence unintentionally created a massive technical blind spot because of this configuration flaw. The square icon on the traffic control screen was actually just a projected position automatically drawn by the computer based on the original paper flight plan, not the actual position of the aircraft. The computer was pretending that Flight 782 was on course. Yet truth always leaves a trace. On the controller's radar screen at the time, if one looked closely, the target of Flight 782 had split into two. Alongside the simulated square running along the correct route, there appeared a small, flickering black dot, continuously drifting off on its own toward the south. That was the real Boeing 737 and the 152 people flying into jeopardy. A lack of specialized training prevented the controllers at Makassar from recognizing the meaning of that flickering black dot. They saw it, but they chose to trust the stable, simulated square on the screen. As the plane flew further away, heading deeper into the southern waters, the actual black dot on the radar screen flickered a few times and vanished completely as it moved beyond the range of the ground radar station. The air traffic controller completed the paperwork handover, signing off that the flight had entered the next sector, on the ground. They believed the plane was preparing to land in Makassar. In the air, the two pilots believed they were close to their destination. The combination of a negligent maintenance system and an undertrained operations center had created a flawless ghost flight. The clock in the cockpit reads 0740. The flight has lasted over an hour and 10 minutes. At this point, the captain retakes control, beginning to descend the Boeing 737 to 8,530 meters to prepare for approach and landing at Makassar, according to the paper schedule. According to the FMS calculations, they are only a few miles from the runway. The captain directs his gaze outside the window, searching for the familiar coastline of Sulawesi Island. But as the thin layer of clouds below clears, what appears before his eyes is not a bustling port city with flat plains. Instead, a massive, wild mountain and dense jungles abruptly emerge right on the right side of the aircraft. The approach path to Makassar has absolutely no mountains. At the same moment, the VOR radio navigation instrument indicates a total failure or loss of signal. The FMS positioning begins to scramble wildly. Confusion quickly turns to shock as the captain realizes they are nowhere near Makassar. Geographic reality delivers a brutal verdict. They have been off course for 45 minutes and are drifting more than 300 kilometers south, trapped in the airspace of remote Sumba Island. Before they can process this terrifying reality, a prolonged beep sounds. The autopilot abruptly disconnects. The massive commercial jet, weighing nearly 50 tons, begins to bank freely in mid-air. The entire primary flight display on the first officer's side goes pitch black. Speed, altitude, and pitch information vanish entirely. The cockpit electrical system falls into a partial collapse. In the tight space, immense psychological pressure weighs heavily on the crew. Amid the chaotic sounds of wind rushing past the metal hull and heavy breathing, the captain looks down at the center console. The only instrument still operating is the standby magnetic compass, a primitive mechanical instrument that requires no electricity. The compass needle spins, then settles on 230 degrees southwest. It completely contradicts the eastern heading previously shown on the computer screen. Advanced technology had lied to them for an entire journey. The pilots were making desperate efforts to manage the crisis, but the entire data foundation they used was broken from the root. They were trying to solve an equation using the wrong numbers. When the captain flipped the navigational power switch to IRS-1 on the left, the first officer's screen lit back up. But the computer delivered another deception. It indicated the aircraft was right next to Makassar. The electronic map continued to lie, while the pilot's naked eyes looking outside saw nothing but the jungles of Sumba Island, because their actual position is too remote. Their radio signals cannot connect directly with any air traffic control station. The crew is forced to use short-frequency VHF radio, desperately asking 6 other commercial flights in the area to relay their voice messages to the control centre. But because they keep providing false coordinates from the faulty IRS, ground stations and neighbouring aircraft cannot locate them on the map. The TCAS traffic collision avoidance system even creates an illusion when the pilots believe they have found a nearby aircraft to follow, but it turns out to be a flight hundreds of kilometres away. The fuel gauge drops steadily. The aircraft has less than an hour of flight time left, while all standard commercial airports capable of handling them are more than 500 kilometres away. There is no way back. The situation becomes so deadlocked that, according to the incident logs, the captain makes an unprecedented proposal, not found in any aviation manual. He asks the purser to go down to the passenger cabin, check if anyone is a native of Makassar or familiar with the region's geography, and bring them up to the cockpit to look through the windshield to help identify the islands below. When a commercial jet pilot must rely on a passenger's eyes to find the way, the safety structure of modern aviation has completely dissolved. The purser flatly refuses, out of fear of causing absolute panic among the passengers. The captain is helpless. He switches on the passenger address system, his voice strained but trying to maintain a final ounce of calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have experienced a navigation problem, and we will be landing in a few minutes. I do not know where we will land, but the most important thing is that I will bring this aircraft down safely." Behind the cockpit door, muffled crying and prayers begin to echo through the cabin as the Boeing 737 drops lower, circling aimlessly over wild forests, bracing for an emergency landing scenario. Amid the invisible trap of technological blindness and fuel draining by the minute, the captain catches a final ray of hope through a break in the clouds below the aircraft's flank. A narrow strip of concrete cuts straight toward the coast of the remote island. It is Tambalaka Airport. Tambalaka is not a standard commercial airport built for large aircraft like the Boeing 737-300. It is actually a small, local domestic strip possessing a short, narrow runway and completely lacking radio navigation systems or ground instrument landing support. It has no precedent for receiving a passenger jet of its size. But in this critical moment, as the final drops of fuel approach depletion, this is no longer a choice. It is the only path to survival. The captain disengages the automated systems, completely bypassing the malfunctioning computers, and switches to manual flight. He makes a wide turn over the skies of Sumba Island, lining up the nose of the Boeing straight with the narrow runway axis. The cockpit becomes breathlessly silent. The 3 trainee flight attendants have now retreated to the back, bracing against the bulkhead. There is only the sound of wind rushing past the windshield gaps and the engines winding down. The pilots rely entirely on their eyes and the flickering precision approach path indicator lights beside the runway. At 8:05, the tyres of the Boeing 737 strike the concrete surface of Tambalaka Airport. The screech of the brakes echoes with a burning smell. The captain deploys the speed brakes to the maximum and activates full engine thrust reversers. The massive aircraft rages down the short strip, shaking violently before braking to a complete halt, just meters from the grass at the end of the runway. All 152 people are safe. Not a single person is injured. The emergency exit doors fly open and passengers flood onto the sunny runway, many collapsing in tears as they realize they have just stepped back from the brink. Everything seems to end with an aviation miracle. But for the investigators, this safe landing is merely the starting point for an even more unsettling truth. If we only look at the outcome, it is a miracle. But if we look at the substance, this landing exposes a deep safety void. Right after the aircraft stopped rolling, the National Transportation Safety Committee of Indonesia launched an immediate investigation. And what they found inside the black boxes completely contradicts the glory of a rescue movie. When investigators extracted the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder, they uncovered a bitter reality. The Boeing 737 had never suffered a total electrical system failure, resulting in a loss of control, as the pilots believed. The exact moment the screens went dark and the autopilot disconnected was actually caused by human action in the cockpit. In their panic to fix the faulty IRS-2 unit, the pilots had manipulated the navigation power transfer switches incorrectly, violating standard procedures. This action unintentionally cut the electrical power supply to the primary flight displays on the first officer's side and tripped the autopilot system, to put it bluntly. A profound lack of understanding of the technical systems of the aircraft they were operating led the crew to personally push themselves into a much more severe crisis. They were not victims of an unavoidable mechanical failure. They were the ones who compounded a routine technical glitch into an emergency that nearly cost 152 lives. The incident of Flight 782 landing at Tambalaka quickly became a shocking scandal for the Indonesian aviation industry. The government ordered the immediate grounding of the aircraft, but what followed this investigation did not lead to a systemic awakening. It was merely a prelude to a series of far worse mistakes, where the price to be paid would no longer be burnt tyre tracks on a runway, but wreckage buried deep beneath the ocean floor. The near miss of Flight 782 was an ultimate indictment of a compromised aviation culture where profit and scheduling were placed above human lives. When an airline chooses to clean plugs instead of replacing a broken navigation system, they assume the risk of a disaster. We must look at this directly. Where is the line between a procedural error and an act of deliberate negligence from management? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. In the chain of errors that led to Flight 782's incident, do you believe the primary responsibility lies with the ground maintenance team, the inadequate training of the flight crew, or the lax management culture of the budget airline itself? We want to hear your analysis and reasoning based on the evidence presented.